Hi, this is Dustin Hausner. I'm the Jewish Outreach and Program Director at the Wayne YMCA. All our Jewish funding is supported through the Jewish Federation of Northern New Jersey. I'm very excited for our guest today. I've had a wonderful privilege of speaking with him on numerous occasions. He's a wonderful rabbinical leader in Wayne, New Jersey. He's actually one of two Rabbi Gurkovs, which he'll explain shortly, that is at the Chabad Center of Passaic County. So I would like to just introduce Rabbi Gurkov. It's wonderful to have you here today.
Thank you, Dustin. It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks for that introduction. As you mentioned, one of two. My father is here as well in Wayne, and my wife and I moved here a couple of years ago to help expand and join the Chabad Center.
Fantastic. So we'll get into that in a little bit, but just for people who are maybe not as familiar with Chabad, they may have heard the name of Chabad, but they haven't gone to a Chabad shul, they're just not familiar. Could you briefly explain a little bit about what is Chabad?
Sure. So the modern Chabad house or Chabad center that many people are familiar with really goes back well over 200 years to the founding of the Hasidic movement, which was founded by Israel Baal Shem Tov in Eastern Europe. And he founded the Hasidic movement. Chabad is a branch of that movement, which is really a philosophy. It really deals with the spiritual side of Judaism, trying to bring practical application to the spiritual aspects of Judaism, to the physical things that we do. And through the last 200 years or so, and especially after the Holocaust, the Chabad Center or Chabad House has spread around throughout the entire world. And our real mission is to try and engage Jews who may be distant from their heritage or may not even know about their heritage, and bring them in and try to expose them to that.
So let me ask, that all sounds fantastic, and again, we'll get into a lot more detail, but I'm curious in regards to, Chabad. There's so many different, I'll use the term sects, but people know like Reform Judaism, conservative, all sorts, and I was wondering, not what makes you distinctive, but is there anything particular that makes, Chabad in a sense of when a person goes to a Chabad shul or service or has that type of experience?
Sure. So there's a couple points there that I just want to dissect. In Chabad, the Chabad philosophy is that there is no such thing as Reform Judaism or conservative Judaism, and there's no such thing either as Orthodox Judaism. We don't believe in Judaisms. There is only one Judaism, and the Judaism is the Torah. So based on the Torah is how we lead our Jewish lives. And Chabad brings that message to everywhere that we go and to everyone that we meet. Every single Jew is a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Leah, and Rachel, and every single Jew has that heritage that they are not just obligated to, but should be encouraged to tap into and to perform and to live. So Chabad doesn't conform to any of these ideas. They're non-existent because they're not found in the Torah. If you open up a Torah, you won't see the word reform, you won't see the word conservative, you won't even see the word Orthodox in the Torah. All you're going to see is the nation of Israel, the Jewish people, and the Torah of truth. And the Torah of truth, being that it's truth, it's perpetual, it doesn't change, it doesn't conform, it is ours to live with, and we take it and we run with it. So that is what a Chabad center is and a Chabad house is, and it's all based upon the teachings of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson, of blessed memory, who was the Lubavitcher Rebbe from his birth in 1902. He was born in 1902 and passed away in 1994.
So let me ask in regards to Chabad, because I've been very fortunate. I've been to a couple of Chabad centers. I keep thinking of Sukkot off the top of my head, of seeing a number of people from different Chabads, coming to asking if you were Jewish and being part of this wonderful ritual with you. And I'm curious, to me, Chabad seems to be an incredibly active movement, if I can call it a movement. And I was wondering if that's something that's been always a principle of Chabad, or that's something that really was from, the Rebbe that you had mentioned previously. I'd love to learn a little bit more about that.
Sure. So the history about it, and like you said, Chabad is extremely active. It's probably the most active Jewish organization in the world right now. There's over 4,000 independently run Chabad centers throughout the world, including on 500 different campuses internationally, as well as our inclusion program for children with special needs called the Friendship Circle, which has hundreds of chapters throughout the world. So Chabad has summer camps, and we have preschools, all of these things throughout the world. We're talking thousands and thousands of institutions. And that really came from the Rebbe himself, Rabbi Schneerson, Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, who after the Holocaust encouraged, specifically after the Holocaust, encouraged his followers to go to communities where Jews don't have Jewish infrastructure, and it may even be a place where they don't even know anything about Judaism, and to teach them and to bring them, to bring it to them. If they're not going to come to the Torah, we'll bring the Torah in its entirety and its truthfulness to the people, never changing and never deviating from it, but allowing people to access it, bringing access. That's really what the Rebbe wanted. And yes, and as we mentioned, it really goes back a little further because it's all based upon an axiom that the Baal Shem Tov, who I mentioned before, the founder of the Hasidic movement, he says that a Jewish soul comes into this world for 70 or 80 years just to do a favor for another Jew. And he says that that's in physical things, even more so in spiritual things. So with that little line, that the whole purpose of a Jew coming into this world is really to help out their fellow Jew. The Rebbe said, if there are Jews in the world that don't even know anything about Judaism, we are obligated to go and teach them. And that's where the Chabad Center began, and that's where the Chabad Center continues to flourish. And every year and every month, really, more shluchim, which are emissaries or ambassadors of the Rebbe, go to different communities. Just last week, there was a new shluchim that went out as well. So every year, more and more couples go out and become shluchim of the Rebbe.
No, that's, I mean, to say the very least, that's incredible to have so many around the world and to be so active. I'm curious with particularly COVID-19. Obviously, almost every shul has had to readjust and re-examine all the things that they've had to do. I'm curious in regards to your Chabad and Chabad in general, how they've been able to adapt with technology. Obviously, we're talking through Zoom, and actually, a few weeks ago, there was a beautiful ceremony through Chabad.org, which I'm sure we'll talk about, where they talked about the 26th anniversary of the Rebbe. There was I believe that was
passing. Yeah,
passing. There was a beautiful, yeah, it had music, it had speakers. It was a really beautiful event, and it, like I said, I was very impressed by it. So I'm very curious what Chabad has been doing to be active, or has it been active for a very long time? That?
Yeah, and it's funny because before COVID-19, before everyone got on Zoom, Chabad has been at the forefront of technological communications since the 70s, actually, even before that. In the 50s, the Chabad were the first people to give Torah classes via radio in the 50s, which was extremely out there. It was an out-of-the-box thing, but the Rebbe knew about it, and the Rebbe gave his blessing and encouraged that the purpose of technology is meant to be harnessed for good. So Chabad actually was giving Torah lectures over the radio in the 50s, and then into the 60s, and in the 70s via satellite TV, actually. The Rebbe would host, at different occasions, the Rebbe would host what's called the Fabrengen, which is the Hasidic gathering. And the Rebbe would speak and would give speeches and talks about Torah topics, current events, things like that. These things would go on for many, many hours. And there were thousands of people in the room. But the Rebbe actually wanted these things to be broadcast on satellite TV. So in the 70s already, I wasn't there, but people who were there told me that these huge trucks with these massive, these huge satellite dishes would come to 770 Eastern Parkway in Brooklyn, and they would create these hookups to hook up to the satellite dish, and the Rebbe's would broadcast actually already in the 70s. So Chabad has been at the forefront of distance learning, let's call it, for over half a century, well before COVID. So we were actually very prepared. Unfortunately, we had to be prepared, but we were prepared. Chabad.org is basically one of the first Jewish websites. It was actually made in 1993. So it's from the first of Jewish websites. It's the largest it's the largest collection of Judaism on the internet right now. And they have many, many classes that we started, obviously, as you mentioned, Zoom. So yeah, we went right into Zoom. And we've been giving more classes actually because Zoom doesn't have that limit where you waiting for people to come. So you can do more classes actually. So we actually did 4 classes a week instead of our usual 2. So we're always trying to do more, even though the situation is pretty negative, but we try to counter that negativity with doing more. So we actually do 4 classes a week now on Zoom, and that's how we've been using that technology.
So you were briefly kind of mentioning at the tail end, which segues perfectly. I was going to ask you about specific programs that your Chabad Center of Passaic Center, like Passaic County, excuse me, of what specific programs do you do? Is there something that you do year round, or is there some new initiatives that you're doing, just so people are aware of what you're up to?
So in general, we run the gamut of programming from children to adults. We have all of our holiday programs. We have specifically programs geared for children, obviously, specific adult education, which is something we're very focused on, not just our Hebrew school, which we have a Sunday Hebrew school, which has been distant learning, which had been distant learning through, throughout the whole COVID crisis. But besides for children, we have specifically geared for adults. And all the regular programming that you would not just necessarily attribute to a shul, because we're not just a shul. A shul or a synagogue is not really the focal point of Judaism. The focal point is education. That's really the focal point of Judaism. So our Chabad Center encompasses all of these things from babies until adults and beyond. So we have all those different types of programs. During COVID, obviously, we weren't able to have our Pesach programming, we weren't able to have our Shavuos programming, but we are able to do lots of other things.
Excellent. So can you talk a little bit about, because I always find it interesting hearing stories of how shuls kind of got started, because it always has such an interesting story about community or about the people who founded it. So, you obviously are one of 2, as I mentioned, rabbis in that shul. So your father was one of the people who founded it. I'm not going to tell the whole story. I want you to tell the story, but please.
So, in 1991, my parents moved here with the blessings of the Lubavitcher Rebbe to set up a Chabad Center here in Wayne. Wayne has a large Jewish community, and it was time for a Chabad house to open here as well. So the Rebbe gave his blessing, and my parents moved here in 1991 and basically built together with lay leaders and community members of the town and surrounding areas, the Chabad Center Passaic County. So encompasses a little more than just Wayne. And they built up the center. We built the Chabad Center in 1999, the actual building at 194 Ratzer Road. And it has a shul, it has a mikvah for women. It's a full center of Judaism. In 2018, I moved together with my wife and my children back to Wayne to help grow and expand the Chabad Center. And one of the things that we're focusing on right now is actually the expansion to build a brand new Jewish preschool.
Nice.
So that is really a focus that my wife, Connie, and I are focusing on now. And that's going to be our next big stepping stone to, the future of expansion of Chabad here in Passaic County and Wayne.
Very nice. Well, obviously a very, very ambitious but important goal. So it's a bit of a cliche, but have you always wanted to be a rabbi yourself, or was this something that you kind of fell into? I'm curious for your particular journey.
I didn't necessarily. I wasn't always going to move back to Wayne. That wasn't something I always thought about, but it's always, it kind of morphed after I got married. And growing up in Chabad circles, in the Chabad, schools and camps that we go to, we're always encouraged, to be. To study the Rebbe's teachings, and the Rebbe's teachings are vast. And in his teachings, he's constantly encouraging the followers to go out and bring Judaism to those who may not have access to it. So it was always something we grew up with. But after I got married, it kind of evolved, and then that's why in 2018 we moved back. But I was ordained as a rabbi actually in 2012, before I was married. I was ordained at the Rabbinical College of America in Morristown, and that happened in 2012.
Very nice. So for someone who's interested in Chabad but doesn't know much about it, hasn't had an opportunity to go to a center, and would be curious to learn more in regards to just something to read, or I know you mentioned Chabad.org, which I will admit I've checked on several occasions, because it has a lot of information about holidays, especially Shabbat, the timing. It's very helpful.
The time, it has the candlelighting time.
Yep.
It's That's what I like to tell people. Go to Chabad.org. That's really the answer. If you want to learn about anything about Judaism, it's all on Chabad.org, and it's all categorized. You can learn about life cycle events. You can learn about holidays. You can learn about customs. You can learn about history. Tremendous amount of Jewish history on there, which is something I noticed a lot of people don't know a lot about.
Mm.
They actually don't know basic generational Jewish history. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. A lot of people from Hebrew school, but once even later on, Joshua, the judges, the prophets, and these types of things, a lot of people don't know that. And Chabad.org has great sections on Jewish history, which I encourage people to read, because once you read about the Jewish history, you actually see we're not just people who began as a nation, let's say in the 40s, which a lot of people attribute to a big shift in Judaism in the 40s, obviously with the Holocaust, the state of Israel, and these types of things. But Judaism has a well-traced 3,332-year history that goes all the way back to Moses, obviously, and to Egypt. So I encourage people to go and read a little bit of Jewish history.
Well, let me ask you, because you just brought up about the importance of Jewish history and that many people unfortunately don't know a lot of the knowledge of it. Is there any, I don't want to say one single story because I feel like that's asking a very large question, but is there any part of our history that you particularly think that people misunderstand, or something that people don't really know much about, that helps kind of how to phrase this, that kind of shows a bit of the Jewish experience, if that makes any sense?
It's a good question. I'm trying to think, because up until, it's a kind of complicated question.
Yeah.
I think that in general, up until probably the 20th century, is really not understood by most Jews today. They don't understand, they don't realize the unbroken chain of Judaism, which had gone on, perpetuated for really 3,000 years, from when the Torah was given until the beginning of the 20th century. There was really this unbroken, unmitigated chain of teaching and tradition and learning. When all the new isms sparked in the late 1800s and early 1900s, where the social fabric of Europe in general was basically being ripped apart at the end of the 1800s, early 1900s. And, we don't have to elaborate into world history. Everyone knows what's going on then. That's kind of when the fragmentation started. And I think people believe that that's really what really matters, what everything that happened after that, but nothing before that really, 3,000 years before all of that happening. People just don't know what Judaism is, because Judaism has 3,000 years of history and of record, that if people would know more about, they would really know a lot more about themselves.
So there's a feeling that almost for many Jews or people who would identify, it's almost like there's a question of almost gaps of knowledge in history that you think would be important if people had an opportunity to learn more about and be able to maybe connect more with the values and the ideas of Judaism.
Sure, and the historical part is the easy part. That's the first layer. It's really all the learning that goes, because Judaism is not just the history. Everything that happened to us is actually something that has meaning and value and lessons. So to learn the history is to know really the basics, but that gives so much to Jewish life. So I would tell people, to your question, if there's something specific to look up, why don't you read Jewish history? If you don't want to get to the heavy books behind me, you could just go to Chabad.org, and you could just read up nice, on the history and get a little more feeling for what Judaism is.
So let me ask, in regards to, because we're talking about history, we're talking about culture a little bit, we're talking about Judaism. What's interesting about Chabad is, if you're someone who's obviously met anyone who's part of Chabad, you have a lovely conversation, you talk, you learn a little bit about it. But for people who haven't had that opportunity, who've maybe seen people who are perceived to be maybe Chabad, there's a lot of concepts and ideas of what Chabad is and isn't. I'm curious if you feel that there are any misconceptions that people have that about Chabad, about what it means, what it does, because unfortunately in these times, I feel like it's so easy to read something online and then get shared and that get moved. So I want to kind of give an opportunity here, if there's anything you think that's maybe mischaracterized or maybe misunderstood about
Um, I haven't really experienced so much of that myself. Uh, People either know what the Chabad Center is or don't know what it is, and if you tell them about it, then they know.
Chabad?
I don't really think people have too many misnomers about it because Chabad is so open. There's really no facade on Chabad at all. So if you know about Chabad, you know exactly what Chabad stands for and what it is. And if you don't know, you can watch this interview, I guess. and there's no facade on it. There's really nothing to hide, and there's nothing deep. It's really just about living what Judaism is, the Torah, bringing the truth of the Torah to people who may not know it, and living the life of Judaism, which is expressed through the Torah.
So on many people's minds, as I'm sure you can imagine, is the high holidays coming up.
Yeah.
It's coming up very soon, and obviously it feels like every other week there's a new development in what the world looks like when it comes to how we're doing things. So
we're rolling with it as it goes, and it's on our minds, and we're speaking about it. What we're going to do. I guess that's your question, right? Like, what are our plans?
Yeah.
We're really trying to accommodate. Obviously, it's a time when a lot of people come to shul where they wouldn't normally come. So you have the social distancing aspect of it, and obviously we're going to be safe. And weekly, we're trying to update, and we're going to formulate a finalized plan within the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Wonderful. So obviously, if anyone who's watching this video, stay tuned to obviously the website and to see what they're going to do. If you're interested in their, of course, holiday programming, however it is decided on what you will end up doing. Right. So I feel like this is almost a who's your favorite child question, but since the high holidays are coming up, do you have a particular high holiday that you personally enjoy or that you has special meaning to you?
So this is an answer I give to everyone who asks me this question.
Please.
In Hasidic philosophy, there's tremendous amount written that the Rebbes, the actual leaders of the movement, they record Hasidic thoughts and things like that. So they always say when it comes to a holiday, if you take up any talk or any manuscript or any treatise of a Rebbe who wrote something about a holiday, he says this is the most important holiday of the year. And as you go from Pesach is the most important. Then you read the one about Shavuos, and Shavuos is the most important. Then you read the one about Sukkot, and Sukkot. So which one is the most important one? And so the Rebbe actually answered, and he said, whatever holiday you are at, that becomes the most important holiday. So when you're at Sukkot, Sukkot is the most important holiday. When you're at Hanukkah, Hanukkah is the most important holiday. And that's how I like to answer it. So every single Jewish holiday is the most important. And it's the most special, and everyone has its things and its meanings. I could tell you that Purim is more fun than Yom Kippur. Hanukkah is a little more tasty than Pesach is. But whenever someone asks me, I say whatever holiday we're at, this is the most important.
So. Before we wrap up, I do want to, because I feel like we mentioned, the Rebbe a number of times, and obviously we spoke a little bit about the history, but can you elaborate a little bit more on what the significance is to the Rebbe in the Chabad community and kind of what is that role? Because I think people may have heard of it and maybe obviously know about the one that we've referenced a couple times, but I don't think people necessarily understand what that is as an actual thing.
So the Lubavitcher Rebbe, I mentioned him before, he was known globally as just the Rebbe. He was the Rebbe because there's many different Hasidic groups, and a Rebbe or a Rebbe is the leader of a group, of a Hasidic group, who is usually a very learned and pious and holy individual. And you may have heard stories about righteous men from hundreds and hundreds of years ago. A tzaddik, the name tzaddik, the word tzaddik will come up, and Moses was a tzaddik. King David was a tzaddik. He was a king and he was a tzaddik. King Solomon. Both the Maimonides, people may be familiar with Maimonides. The Rambam was a great scholar and a tzaddik. So a Rebbe is a scholar, a godly person, and a tzaddik. He's a righteous individual. and he leads the movement. So Chabad had a series of 7 different Rebbes, from basically father to son-in-law to son to son to son. So there was a son-in-law mix in there, and the Rebbe was actually the son-in-law of his predecessor, the 6th Rebbe. The Rebbe was actually also a cousin. He was a direct descendant of the previous Rebbe's grandfather as well. So they were cousins. They were all of the same family. And the Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, married his wife, the previous Rebbe's daughter, in 1929. And in 1940, the previous Rebbe with his family escaped Nazi Germany on the heels, literally, of the SS, who were trying to find him as being the leader, one of the leaders of Jewry. He actually escaped and made it to the United States in 1940. In 1941, the Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, who was not with his father-in-law at the time, escaped through Lisbon, Portugal, on one of the last civilian boats to leave Europe in 1941. They were actually chased by U-boats.
Wow.
Yeah, and the ship managed to get out of the fire, the area of warfare, and made it to the United States in 1941. And in 1950, for about 10 years, the previous Rebbe was here, and he established Chabad and its institutions in the United States. And in 1950, he passed away, and his son-in-law, the 7th, in a line of generations, became the 7th Rebbe. And that's when he began his revolution of basically revitalizing and revolutionizing Judaism, not just in America, but throughout the world, by sending out emissaries throughout the world to bring, again, the Torah and Judaism to those who deserve it, because the Jewish people, even though they may not know about it, it's their right. Every Jew has the right to study the Torah and has the right to adhere to the Torah. And as a heritage, it says in the Torah that the Torah is actually an inheritance to every single Jew. So the Rebbe said, go out and bring that to those who may not know. I like to tell people, we're basically, those, sometimes you get a phone call from someone who says you have lost assets.
Yep.
We're looking, so the Rebbe basically made his followers into lost asset collectors. We're bringing the lost asset of the Torah to those who may not even know that they have this asset, and that's what we are.
I like that. That's wonderful. So I'll ask the obvious question for anyone who's interested in, obviously, what your shul is doing, what you and your father are doing. Where's the best place for them to find out information about what your programs are, what things to look up? Again,
yeah, everything is on our website, jewishwayne.com. Very easy to remember, jewishwayne.com. It's all there. We have our different schedule for our Zoom classes, and anything else that you need is on there as well. So you could reach out to us through there as well. So jewishwayne.com.
Fantastic. So I want to, of course, thank you so much for giving us the time and educating us. A lot of wonderful information you've been able to provide. For those of you who are watching, I just want to say stay healthy, stay safe, and look forward to having you watch a future episode. So again, Rabbi, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Dustin, and thank you for giving me this chance. So I appreciate it, and as well, just like you said to everyone else, hope everyone is safe, and we could have a great Rosh Hashanah coming up too. That's what we're praying for.
Oh, absolutely right. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Take care.